It's getting real. So if you've been under a rock for the past 4 days or so, sorry, I'm late with this, my bad, I have a life. This was revealed. The Sun and the Star by Rick Riordan and Mark Oshiro, a Nico D'Angelo novel coming out May 2nd, 2023. Yeah. So about a year ago today, I made a video of the very first speculations that I had for this book, and now that it's getting more real and that we have a title and a cover and a release date, I'm here to talk about it even more because my brain is 100% just zeroed in, zoom enhanced on Nico D'Angelo probably 90% of the time. So let's talk about it. If you're new here, hi, I like to talk about books, especially about Percy Jackson and his related adventures. So if you like that kind of content, feel free to go ahead and subscribe to my channel. Most of the folks who watch my videos aren't, and it would actually really help me out because if this were my full-time job, I get to talk about things sooner when news actually gets dropped. So if you'd like to help me out and support the channel, I would absolutely appreciate you commenting, subscribing, liking, all that jazz. But without further ado, let's get into The Sun and the Star. This book has been in my brain, eating away at it like little worms since 2020, because in 2020, Tower of Nero, the last book in the Trials of Apollo series, came out, and you know how Rick likes to put in little sprinkles, little hints, little dashes of, by the way, here's a plot point I might talk about later in his books. Yeah, he did that very, very blatantly in Tower of Nero, and every single sign pointed to Nico D'Angelo book. And you know me, you see the shirt I'm wearing, you've seen the various ways I talk about Nico and how I need to protect him at all costs, but also he kind of scares me a little bit. I love him. He's great, he's fantastic, he's deserved his own standalone story for such a long time, and now he's finally getting it. Last year I talked a lot about the various speculation that I had for the book, but now, now, we have a synopsis. We have an approximate page number. We have a heartbreakingly beautiful piece of art depicting Will Salas and Nico D'Angelo in Tartarus, at the doors of death, the very same doors of death that Percy and Annabeth are in front of on the cover of House of Hades. This book is gonna break me, I just know it. Some other fun little facts. Mark Oshiro is the one who came up with the title, and obviously it's based on the line in House of Hades that Bob says to Percy and Annabeth, where he says to tell the sun and stars hello for me. That was actually a working title for the book, and it ended up becoming the actual title for it, which just is a testament to how much Mark is a massive fan of these books and how much they're going to do these characters so much justice. And I just, amazing, love it. So if you look through the information about this book on various bookseller websites, you will see that The Sun and the Star, a Nico D'Angelo novel, comes out on May 2nd, 2023. It is geared towards ages 10 to 14, so it is that same middle grade age range as most of the books that Rick Riordan writes, and it is also approximately, according to Barnes & Noble, 480 pages long. For reference, that's a little bit longer than most of the Percy Jackson books, but a little bit shorter than most of the Heroes of Olympus books. And that number might change because we are still over half a year out from the release date of the book and things can be switched up on a dime. Obviously, I don't know too much about the publishing process, but I do know that even when advanced copies go out to readers a few weeks or months prior to the book being released, things can still change up until that book goes to print and is officially out into the world. So you never know, it might end up being even longer. I would appreciate having all the possible content. It is a standalone book, like I said, so this isn't going to be a new Nico series, but rather just a single book focusing on this one adventure of Nico and Will going to Tartarus. That means that pretty much everything we need to get done is going to start and finish be wrapped up in this book, hopefully, probably, but then again, knowing Rick and his writing, it's probably also going to plant the seeds for some other future spin-off novels. I know that he's talked about wanting to do a Hunters of Artemis novel, and I would also really love to have a standalone novel of maybe like Hazel or Piper or like any other characters that we kind of miss and haven't gotten too much alone time with. I would love to see them flourish in their own individual books, but for now, we're getting Nico, and I've worn Nico has been waiting for his time to shine since 2007, so I am very excited for it. I'm not sure how many of you were on Twitter earlier this week, but you may have noticed that some folks were posting about the title of the book before it was actually officially revealed, and that is because it did actually get leaked a couple hours before any official announcements were made. If you looked through the Riordan website, they actually had a link for it, so some people were very, very smart and sneaky and found out the title before it was officially announced, but then Becky and Mark and Rick all came on the socials and were like, yep, that's the title. By the way, you're getting a cover next week, and then bam, The cover was designed by Khadija Khatib, who also did the US cover of Daughter of the Deep. And for once, I think the very first time ever actually, the US and UK covers of The Sun and the Star are going to be the same. The only thing that's different is the typeface. Obviously the UK typeface matches the already existing typeface for the rest of the Riordan verse, whereas the US one looks completely different from practically everything. And I think that really sets this off as its own standalone existing novel. And I kind of like it. The colors were definitely not what I was expecting, but honestly, it's perfect. It matches the title and the aesthetic of like Nico's darkness and Will's light so perfectly. On Rick's blog, he gave us a little bit more information, including a synopsis of the book, which I will get into and analyze in just a little bit. But he also mentioned that he would be going on tour with co-author Mark Oshiro when the book is released. I will be front row at whichever tour stop is nearest to me, and I will be just sitting there shaking, probably, honestly. Rick hasn't gone on tour for one of his books since pre-pandemic. I believe the last book he went on tour for was The Tyrant's Tomb, which was the 4th book in the Trials of Apollo series, and I did indeed go to that tour, and I got a snazzy t-shirt from it, so I cannot wait to see what kind of potential Solangelo merch might be at this tour, or any kind of like fun prints, or like some kind of fun interactive thing. Rick's tours tend to be an interactive, talking kind of lecture format, and then you get the book as its own thing. It's not a signing line, it's more of a fun presentation for everyone, which I really like about Rick's tours. And now that he's bringing Mark, I would love to see how the two of them bounce off of each other. Hearing about their writing process of this book, how Mark would write their portion, send it to Rick, and then Rick would change things, and then send it to the editor, and the editor would fix things, and it would go like in a little triangle circle thing. Sounds so much fun, and I know Mark is a hilarious person. I've met them before, I've talked to them, and I know Rick's like dry humor shines through in both his tours that I've gone to and in his books, so seeing those two together do a presentation about Nico and Will probably just make my heart burst. It's gonna be so much fun. One more thing before I get into the synopsis of this book and my analysis of it, the Trials of Apollo books are required reading, my friends. I know a lot of folks who are very in love with Nico and his story are folks who really cared about him in Heroes of Olympus, but I have a good feeling that a lot of folks who are here watching this video haven't read Trials of Apollo, because as much as I interact with this fandom, I see so many people who say like, oh yeah, I stopped after Blood of Olympus. Please read Trials of Apollo. They're so good. They go so much into the inherent abusiveness of the gods and how their child neglect leads to just a toppling domino effect of demigods rising up and betraying what any like good ideals are. Like, oh my god, it's so good. It's so good. Reading from Apollo's perspective is hilarious and amazing. We get to visit all of our old favorite characters. Literally every single character from the original books appears in Trials of Apollo in some way, shape, or form. Please read it. They're amazing. It's 5 books just like PJO and Heroes of Olympus. So like, also, you're not gonna get to know enough about Nico and Will together unless you read Trials of Apollo, because most of their development comes from those books individually, especially Tower of Nero, where like it is basically a Nico and Will book. It's just starring Apollo and Meg with like Nico and Will as the second tier characters there. So please read them. They're so amazing. One of my favorite things about Nico and Will's relationship in Tower of Nero is that they are undeniably like a power couple in the same way that Percy and Annabeth are. Like they work in tandem so well together. They do go on a quest together in Tower of Nero, and it is just so seamlessly well done the way they cooperate with one another, fight side by side, and the dynamic that they've built between each other is so interesting, because obviously you know Nico as this like stoic, independent, I don't need anyone and no one needs me kind of person, and then Will Solace comes along and it's just like you thought, nope. But Will is not like Nico's saving grace. He's not there saving grace, oof. Will is not there just to help Nico, to protect him, to heal him. Like, it's not like that at all. They truly are on equal level with each other, and Nico also enables Will to kind of find his own power and his own strength, because like being a child of Apollo is like being a dime a dozen, but Nico helps Will realize that even though he doesn't necessarily have like the power of prophecy or any kind of musical talent, he is an amazing healer, and that strength combined with Nico's entire domain of power being death, like they are literal life and death, like such a good mesh together. It's just amazing. All right, now let's get to the synopsis. I'm going to read it word for word, and then I'm going to go back and give you my speculation. So, as the son of Hades, Nico D'Angelo has been through so much, from the premature deaths of his mother and sister, to being outed against his will, to losing his friend Jason during the trials of Apollo. But there is a ray of sunshine in his life. Literally, his boyfriend, Will Solace, the son of Apollo. Together, the two demigods can overcome any obstacle or foe. At least that's been the case so far. Now Nico is being plagued by a voice calling out to him from Tartarus, the lowest part of the underworld. He thinks he knows who it is. a reformed titan named Bob, whom Percy and Annabeth had to leave behind when they escaped Hades' realm. Nico's dreams and Rachel Dare's latest prophecy leave little doubt in Nico's mind that Bob is in some kind of trouble. Nico has to go on this quest whether Mr. D and Chiron like it or not. And of course, Will insists on coming along with. But can a being made of light survive the darkest part of the underworld? And what does the prophecy mean that Nico will have to leave something of equal value behind? Oh boy, all right, let's start at the beginning. First and foremost, I love that the very first line that mentions what Nico has gone through mentions Bianca and his mother Maria dying, because as much as Nico's character is entirely based on the event of losing Bianca, it almost kind of gets buried under all the other trauma he's been through. If you recall reading one of the other short stories, I believe it's the short story where Percy and Talia and Nico go into the underworld. The Quest for the Sword of Hades, that's what it is. Nico losing his mother is such a strange memory for him because obviously after his memories were wiped, he almost doesn't remember her at all. But in this short story, he sees an apparition of her and like cries out like mama under his breath. And of course we know that like Nico and Bianca only had each other and no one else throughout their childhood. So having Nico travel back to the underworld, knowing that at some point his mother and sister were both down there and he couldn't bring either of them back when he was able to bring Hazel back, is gonna cause so much trauma, which he does not need. He's already got enough for like 17 people combined. I am going to love seeing Nico explore the fact that like he is the only family that he has aside from Hazel, who he brought back from the underworld. Like if he wasn't a son of Hades and didn't have that power, he would be completely alone family-wise. And so to go back into his father's domain where at some point the souls of all of his loved ones were still existing in some capacity, like that's just oof, right at the heartstrings. Like knowing that he can't do anything about it. I'm also going to talk about the fact that this synopsis does mention the fact that he lost Jason, who was a good friend of his. Every single mention of this book brings up Jason in some capacity. If you didn't know Jason was dead, I already told you had to read Trials of Apollo. That's your own fault. Anyway, I mean, it's been a few years. I'm pretty sure we all know that Jason is, dead and gone and buried. Check the pulse and come back swearing it's the same after 4 years in the grave? Yeah. But again, as I just mentioned, the souls of the dead do live in the underworld in some capacity, so I'm wondering if we're going to touch on Jason's afterlife and whether or not we know, like, did he try for rebirth? Did he go to Elysium for being a hero? Like, I would love to know what happened to Jason after the events of the Burning Maze, because we know what happened as far as Bianca goes. She tried for rebirth, so did Luke Castellan. We know that some heroes go to Elysium and others rot in the fields of Asphodel the same way Hazel did, so I would love to see where Jason's soul ended up. And I have a feeling we're gonna get that answered in this book. I wanna touch on the wording of this sentence. This was a speculation that I had over a year ago and I'm still sticking with it. The way that Nico's being plagued by a voice calling out to him and he thinks he knows who it is. Hey Siri, play I Think He Knows by Taylor Swift. He thinks he knows it's Bob, but he doesn't know for sure. Someone's gotta tell him, he doesn't know. My idea, I mean, if you ask me, that boy's walking right into a trap. I'm sorry, there is no way. There's no way it's that simple. It is, nope. This synopsis also mentions a prophecy spoken by Rachel Dare for the very first time, so obviously we're going to get a little bit more of Rachel, which I love. Her power of prophecy is back after the events of the Trials of Apollo, which is fantastic. So I would love to see her stepping more into this oracle role because she was also a very fun member of the Tower of Nero crew. Her, Will, and Nico all have a very fun friendship, so I'm gonna love seeing Rachel, but the fact that she has a prophecy that also does not clearly state anything, as prophecies tend to do, I'm gonna love to see how it ends up getting twisted and completely just befuddled and wrong. I know it's gonna be wrong. You can't tell me otherwise. I know it's gonna be wrong. How is it gonna be wrong? I don't know, but I'm just bracing myself for the worst. And then, one more little thing. What does the prophecy mean that Nico will have to leave something of equal value behind? Back in Heroes of Olympus, when the doors of death were open, there was no such thing as leaving things behind. Like, you could just walk in and out. And the whole reason Bob is trapped is because someone had to close the doors. And Bob did that. So if they're going to rescue Bob, who's gonna close the doors behind them? I did just mention a lot of folks we know whose souls are in the underworld, but they're not in Tartarus. So who's to say? Who's to say, truly? 2 people are going down there. The doors have to be closed on both sides. You know what that line about leaving something of equal value behind could also be, now that I'm thinking about it? You all know the story of Orpheus and Eurydice, right? The whole don't look back thing? You know, looking back has actually been a trend in the Riordan verse. The last line of The Last Olympian is, "For once I didn't look back." And Percy sure is looking back at the reader on the cover of House of Hades. You know, maybe that look back thing might come back to haunt us in here. Who's to say? Who knows? I mean, after all, Apollo is the god of music, and even though Will doesn't really have musical powers, you could even say that Will Solace is kind of like Nico's muse, the same way that Eurydice is for Orpheus. I'm gonna go listen to Hadestown and try not to think about that too hard, but you know, just an idea I had. Now, to be completely blunt, I don't think that Will and Nico are gonna break up. I don't think that Will and Nico are going to be separated. I do not think that Nico or Will is going to stay in the underworld. That's just not. I just don't think they would do that to us, especially Mark. I don't think they would do that to us because the bury your gays trope is incredibly harmful. And Rick did write on his blog that like folks have been speculating about character deaths for ages and they've almost always been wrong. Almost, Chase and Grace. So, you know, I can pretty confidently say that neither Nico nor Will is going to die, but then again, as spoken by the prophecy in Battle of the Labyrinth, you could lose a love to worse than death. So, you know, just a little concerned on that front. But then again, because Rick tries so hard to have this inclusivity and this proper representation of queer characters, I don't think he's going to kill anyone off necessarily. I know that he's going to fight to have these characters at least have somewhat of a happy ending, or ending as, you know, this universe is going to live on forever. I don't think this is going to be a clear-cut ending for any of these characters, but I definitely think it's going to wrap up a few plot points that we've been wanting to know about from the past few books and kind of focus on giving them a more solid closure to their adventure. So we'll see. We'll see what happens. So in other words, like, they may not bury your gays, but they might slap them around a little bit. Also, you wanna know a fun fact? Today, the day I'm filming this, which is October 2nd, 2022, is the 10th anniversary of the day that Mark of Athena came out, which means happy 10-year anniversary to the day that Percy and Annabeth fell into Tartarus. Good times, good times. And just as a last little bonus, as a thank you for those of you who've watched this far into the video, I actually met Mark Oshiro last year at YALLFest, and I sure did ask them a couple of things about this book. Now, obviously, because it was a year ago and because they're not allowed to talk about a book that's not out yet, I wasn't able to get too many questions answered, but I do know a little bit about, let's see, the balance of how much of this book is about Nico and how much of this book is about Will, and how much of it is about both of them. I know a little bit about certain questions that I had, per se, like Nico's ability to control people's dreams. And I know that some of those questions may be getting answered, maybe. Who knows? It's been a year since I asked them, so things might have changed. But I have a good feeling this book is going to wreck me in the best way possible, and I absolutely will be ripping it open on its publication date and sharing all my opinions about it here on this channel and on my various other socials. So if you want to hear me talk all about Percy Jackson in various capacities, please feel free to subscribe to this channel and follow me on my socials that are in the bio below. I love keeping you all updated on various Percy Jackson news, and I will continue to do that until this series utterly destroys me eventually one day. That's all the info I've got on the Sun and the Star right now, but stay tuned, keep on watching. I appreciate you all so much, and I will see you in the next video.